The flour-dusted fingers that once crafted desserts for royalty now carefully arranged simple buttercream roses on a humble chocolate cake. Sarah Miller stood back, examining her work with a critical eye honed by years of professional training. Perfect wasn't the goal anymore. Good enough for a school bake sale would suffice. Still, old habits died hard. A small kitchen timer buzzed. Time to go. Shadows lurked behind brilliance. No one suspected the tired woman in the second-hand clothes was once a culinary star who had walked away from fame at the height of her powers. Now, she was just a single mother trying to help her daughter fit into a world of privilege neither of them truly belonged in. Before we dive into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from. "Mom, hurry up!" Emma called from the doorway, adolescent impatience evident in her voice. "We're going to be late!" "And I promised Mrs. Harrington I'd help set up." Sarah carefully placed the cake in a simple plastic carrier, nothing like the specialized equipment she'd once used to transport her award-winning creations. "Coming, sweetheart." Their apartment was small, but immaculate, evidence of Sarah's attention to detail. The kitchen, however modest, remained her sanctuary, the one place where she allowed herself to remember who she used to be. "Do you think they'll like it?" Sarah asked, sliding the cake onto the back seat of their aging sedan. Emma hesitated, her 14-year-old face momentarily revealing the social calculations that had become second nature since receiving the scholarship to Westfield Academy. "It looks homemade." "It is homemade," Sarah replied with a gentle smile. "That's rather the point. The other moms don't really do homemade," Emma muttered, looking out the window. "They order from boutique bakeries or have their private chefs make something." Sarah felt the familiar pang, the knowledge that despite her sacrifices, her daughters still faced reminders of their difference every day. "Well, they're missing out. Trust me, nothing from a shop will taste like this." Westfield Academy sprawled across an expansive campus, its stone buildings and manicured lawns declaring its prestige without a word. Sarah parked her car among the Mercedes and BMWs, noticing a small scratch on her passenger door that hadn't been there before. Inside the gymnasium, tables draped in pristine white linens displayed an array of elaborate desserts. Fondant flowers, gold leaf accents, and professional packaging dominated the landscape. Emma quickly spotted Victoria Harrington directing volunteers and hurried over, leaving Sarah to carry the cake alone. "Emma, perfect timing," Victoria said, her voice carrying that particular timbre of the perpetually in charge. Her gaze shifted to Sarah, approaching with the plastic container. "And you must be Emma's mother?" Sarah smiled politely. "Yes, Sarah Miller. Nice to meet you." Victoria's perfectly manicured hand gave a dismissive wave. "You can set up over there. The homemade section." She emphasized the word like it was foreign. Sarah carried her cake to the designated table, noticeably separated from the main displays. As she removed the plastic lid, she heard the whispers. "Is that actually homemade? How quaint. Does she know this is a fundraiser? People expect quality." Sarah pretended not to hear, arranging her cake with the same precision she once used on desserts served to dignitaries. She placed her handwritten label, "Triple Chocolate Espresso Torte, $25. Victoria appeared at her shoulder, eyebrows raised. $25? For that? She lifted a perfectly shaped brow. "The professionals are charging a minimum of $75. "I believe in fair pricing," Sarah replied evenly. Victoria's laugh tinkled like ice in a crystal glass. "Fair? Dear, this is charity. We aim high." She plucked Sarah's card and replaced it with one reading $5. "This isn't a yard sale bake-off," Victoria added, loud enough for nearby mothers to hear. "Perhaps next year you might consider just donating cash instead." Emma, witnessing from across the room, suddenly became intensely interested in arranging napkins, her cheeks burning red. Sarah swallowed her pride and smiled tightly. "I understand. It's my first time participating." "We can tell," said a blonde woman, arranging macarons nearby. "I'm Melissa. My daughter Olivia is in Emma's class." She gestured to her professionally boxed treats. "Fleur Patisserie delivers these specially for events. Their wait list is 3 months." "They look lovely," Sarah managed. Victoria glanced at her watch. "The sale opens in 20 minutes. Emma, come help arrange the premium table." Emma shot her mother an apologetic look before hurrying after Victoria, leaving Sarah alone at the homemade table. She carefully adjusted her cake's position, using techniques she'd perfected years ago to highlight its best features. An hour into the sale, Sarah's isolation became painfully obvious. The main tables bustled with activity, while she stood alone, watching elegantly dressed parents bypass her section without a glance. Victoria approached with a cluster of women. "And this is our community contribution area," she announced, gesturing towards Sarah's cake with barely concealed disdain. "How democratic," remarked one woman in designer clothing. Another peered at Sarah's cake. "Did you use a mix?" "No," Sarah replied quietly. "It's from scratch. Family recipe." "How charming," the woman said, with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "My chef trained in Vienna. He simply refuses to use American chocolate." The group moved on, laughing about something Sarah couldn't hear. By mid-afternoon, nearly every professional dessert had sold. Sarah's cake remained untouched, the lone item on her table. Emma kept her distance, circulating with popular girls whose mothers served on committees. "Not much interest?" Victoria asked, approaching with a clipboard. "Perhaps we should discount it further. The janitors might want it." Sarah felt her cheeks burn, but maintained her composure. "There's still time." "Of course." Victoria nodded sympathetically. "Though I must say, these events are rather different from what you might be used to." Victoria's attention shifted suddenly, her expression transforming from condescension to deference. Sarah turned to see what had caused such a dramatic change. A distinguished older man with silver hair and an impeccable suit approached the tables, surveying the remaining offerings with a critical eye. "Richard!" Victoria exclaimed, moving quickly to intercept him. "We're so honored you could make it. Let me show you our premium selections." "In a moment, Victoria," he said politely, but firmly, his gaze settling on Sarah's table. He walked directly to her lonely cake, studying it with surprising intensity. "Is that a Sacher-Tort variant?" he asked, leaning closer to examine the glossy chocolate surface. Before Sarah could answer, Victoria interjected. "Oh, that's just a homemade contribution. We have some lovely professional options left." "I wasn't asking about the others," he said, his tone brooking no interruption. He turned to Sarah. "The chocolate lacquer has a beautiful shine. Hand-tempered?" Sarah nodded, momentarily speechless to find someone who recognized the technique. "Yes, and I've modified the traditional recipe with a hint of espresso in the ganache layer." "Magnificent attention to detail," he said, eyes twinkling with appreciation. "I'd like to try it." Victoria scoffed, unable to contain herself. "Richard, surely you're joking. That's clearly an amateur effort." The man straightened, raising an eyebrow at Victoria. "Amateur?" He shook his head slowly. "Do you know who this is?" A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the intensity of the conversation. Emma edged closer, confusion evident on her face. "This," Richard continued, gesturing towards Sarah with unexpected reverence, is Sarah Miller. She trained at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris before working as head pastry chef at the Ritz in London. Her chocolate work is legendary in culinary circles. A hushed silence fell over the room. Emma's mouth dropped open, her eyes darting between her mother and the elegant stranger. Victoria stared at Sarah, her perfectly composed expression crumbling into disbelief. I had no idea. Sarah felt a strange calm washing over her. It had been years since anyone had recognized her professional work. I stepped away from professional kitchens when my daughter was born, she explained quietly. But I still teach advanced pastry techniques online. Emma pushed through the gathering crowd. Mom, is that true? Sarah nodded, her eyes never leaving her daughter's astonished face. It was a different life, sweetheart. Richard smiled broadly. My restaurants have been trying to recruit her for years. That homemade cake would sell for $200 in any of my establishments. He pulled out his wallet and placed several $100 bills in the donation box. I'll take the whole cake, if I may. Melissa, the macaron mother, leaned forward. But you never mentioned all those PTA meetings. It didn't seem relevant, Sarah shrugged. I'm just Emma's mom now. Victoria had regained some composure. Well, this is certainly unexpected. Had we known of your background, we would have featured your contribution more prominently. Perhaps next time, you might consider that value isn't always in the packaging, Sarah said gently, carefully transferring the cake to a box Richard's assistant had procured. Some of the most extraordinary things come from the most ordinary-looking places. Several other parents approached, suddenly eager to introduce themselves. Sarah noticed Emma watching the scene unfold, pride replacing her earlier embarrassment. Would you consider demonstrating some techniques at our next fundraiser? Asked a mother who had ignored Sarah all day. We could charge for attendance, Richard laughed. Her demonstration fee starts at $5,000 in my establishments. The crowd murmured, impressed, while Victoria's face had drained of all color. Emma drifted closer, wide-eyed. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me? There's a lot we haven't talked about yet, Sarah said softly. Some stories take time to tell. Richard cleared his throat. Sarah's signature chocolate work once earned a standing ovation at the International Pastry Competition in Milan. The judges said they'd never tasted such perfectly balanced flavors. Victoria attempted to recover, smoothing her designer skirt. Well, what a delightful surprise hidden in our midst. We simply must feature your talents at the upcoming charity gala. I don't do public appearances anymore, Sarah replied. Her voice was gentle but firm. But surely for Westfield. Mom doesn't have to if she doesn't want to, Emma interrupted, suddenly protective. The confidence in her voice caught Sarah by surprise. Richard's eyes twinkled. Your daughter has your backbone, Sarah. Several parents now crowded around, peppering Sarah with questions about her former career. The same women who had dismissed her hours earlier now competed for her attention. Did you really make dessert for the royal family? Is it true you turned down a television contract? Could you recommend a good cooking class for my Penelope? Sarah answered politely, but kept her responses brief. This sudden reversal of fortune felt hollow after the morning's humiliation. She caught Emma watching her, a new awareness in her daughter's eyes. Ladies, Richard finally interrupted, I believe we've taken enough of Sarah's time today. The bake sale is nearly over. As the crowd reluctantly dispersed, he turned to Sarah. It's been too long. I'd like to catch up properly. Perhaps dinner next week? Bring Emma, of course. I'd like that, Sarah said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. With her mother's newfound celebrity status at Westfield, Emma's social standing transformed overnight. The same girls who had barely acknowledged her existence now clamored for her attention between classes. During lunch the next day, Emma found herself at the center of a crowded table. "Is it true your mom catered Prince William's birthday?" asked Olivia, Melissa's daughter. Emma hesitated. "I don't actually know." "How could you not know something like that?" demanded another girl. Emma shrugged. She never talked about her career. "I just knew she baked amazing things at home. My mom said she was like super famous," Olivia continued. "She has all these photos of your mom's desserts saved on Pinterest." The irony wasn't lost on Emma. The same mothers who had snubbed Sarah were now frantically researching her background. Meanwhile, Sarah sat in her small apartment, staring at an email from Richard Blackwood, celebrity chef and restaurant magnate. His offer was generous: consulting position, flexible hours, prestigious association. The salary made her eyes widen. Her phone buzzed with the 5th call from Victoria Harrington that day. She let it go to voicemail again. Sarah opened her laptop and typed her name into the search engine, something she hadn't done in years. Pages of results appeared. Articles, interviews, videos from her previous life. One headline caught her eye: "Pastry prodigy Sarah Miller disappears from culinary scene." She clicked, reading about her own vanishing act through a journalist's puzzled perspective. Words like mysterious departure and at the height of her powers jumped from the screen. Sarah closed the laptop. That chapter had ended for good reasons, reasons that still mattered. When Emma came home that afternoon, she stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching her mother knead dough with practiced precision. "Why did you quit?" Emma asked quietly. Sarah's hands paused. "Many reasons, mostly because I wanted to be your mom more than I wanted to be Chef Miller." The dinner at Richard's flagship restaurant was nothing short of spectacular. Emma, dressed in a new outfit Sarah had splurged on, looked around wide-eyed at the elegant surroundings. "This is where you used to work? Like, this kind of place?" she whispered. Sarah shook her head. "Similar, but not quite this, opulent. Richard has always had a flair for the dramatic." Richard himself emerged from the kitchen in immaculate chef whites. "Sarah," he beamed, embracing her. "And this must be Emma. The resemblance is remarkable." Throughout the evening, Richard shared stories of Sarah's culinary achievements, painting a picture of the woman Emma had never known existed. "Your mother created a chocolate sculpture for the French ambassador that made the entire room applaud," Richard recounted. 6 feet tall, perfectly tempered, it was an absolute masterpiece, with sugarwork so delicate it looked like spun glass. Emma stared at her mother. "You never told me any of this." "It was another life," Sarah said softly. After dessert, Richard leaned forward. "I've been thinking about your situation. I have a proposition." His offer was straightforward. A position as head of pastry development for his restaurant group. Limited travel, creative control, and hours that would accommodate Emma's schedule. "I can't uproot Emma," Sarah hesitated. "The main test kitchen is 20 minutes from Westfield," Richard countered. "Emma could keep her scholarship, and you'd be back doing what you were born to do." On the drive home, Emma was uncharacteristically quiet. "What are you thinking?" Sarah asked. "I'm thinking about how I've been embarrassed by our apartment, our car, your clothes," Emma confessed, tears forming. "All this time you could have been someone important, but you chose to be just my mom instead." Sarah reached for her daughter's hand. "Being your mom made me more important than any job title ever could." "Are you going to take his offer?" Sarah smiled. I think it's time I found a way to be both your mom and Chef Miller. At home, Sarah opened a trunk she'd kept locked for years. Inside lay her professional knives, specialty tools, and a leather-bound portfolio. She traced her fingers over the gold-embossed letters, Chef Sarah Miller. Some talents couldn't and shouldn't stay hidden forever. Over the next 3 months, Sarah created a new rhythm to her life. Mornings were devoted to Emma and household responsibilities. Afternoons and some evenings found her in Richard's state-of-the-art test kitchen, her hands once again performing the practiced ballet of high-level pastry work. Word spread quickly through the culinary community. Chef Miller had returned. Food magazines requested interviews. Former colleagues reached out. Social media buzzed with speculation about her comeback story. At Westfield, the dynamic had shifted permanently. Victoria Harrington now greeted Sarah with effusive warmth whenever their paths crossed. "Sarah, we simply must have you on the fundraising committee," Victoria gushed one afternoon during school pickup. "Your industry connections would be invaluable." "I'll consider it," Sarah replied with a polite smile. "My schedule is rather full these days." Emma noticed the change in her mother most of all. There was a new confidence in Sarah's posture, a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Even their apartment reflected the transformation. Sarah had replaced their worn furniture with modestly upgraded pieces, and her once empty walls now displayed framed photos of her culinary achievements alongside Emma's school portraits. "Do you miss it?" Emma asked one evening, watching her mother review plans for a dessert menu. "The big kitchens? The famous people?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Sometimes. But what I've found now is better. Balance. I get to create beautiful things without sacrificing time with you." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I like who you are now. Not just mom, not just Chef Miller. Both." Sarah smiled, realizing that in reclaiming part of her past, she'd actually created something entirely new. A future that honored all facets of herself. When Emma's school announced its annual career day, she surprised Sarah with a simple request. "Will you come speak about being a pastry chef?" Not the famous part, just the creating part. 3 months after the fateful bake sale, Sarah stepped into the gleaming kitchen of Richard's flagship restaurant. Steel and marble surrounded her as she surveyed the domain that was now partially hers. "Chef Miller, the staff is assembled," said a young sous chef, still slightly awestruck by her presence. Sarah nodded, adjusting her crisp white chef's coat, a far cry from the worn cardigan she'd worn that day at Westfield. She'd accepted Richard's offer with modified terms, partnership rather than employment, and a schedule that still prioritized being home for Emma. In the dining room, Victoria Harrington sat with several Westfield mothers, all of whom had requested Sarah's table specifically. They'd become regular patrons, eager to associate with her rising star. "Your dessert menu is simply revolutionary," Victoria gushed when Sarah made a brief appearance tableside. "We're so fortunate to have discovered your talent." Sarah smiled politely. Sometimes, the most valuable things are hidden in plain sight. That evening, driving home in her new car, practical but no longer embarrassingly old, Sarah felt a contentment she'd long forgotten. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Killed it on my math test, making celebration cookies. Need anything from the store?" Sarah smiled. Emma had recently developed her own interest in baking, now that it was no longer tied to social embarrassment. Later, as they stood side by side at their kitchen counter, now upgraded with professional-grade equipment, Sarah watched her daughter carefully pipe buttercream roses, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Not bad, Sarah assessed, professional instincts momentarily taking over. Emma grinned. I had a pretty good teacher. The timer dinged for another batch of cookies. As Sarah removed them from the oven, she reflected on how quickly life had transformed. The hidden talent she'd tucked away had finally found its proper place, not as her entire identity, but as one facet of a fuller life. You know, Sarah said, setting down the hot tray, sometimes our greatest strengths grow stronger when we give them room to breathe. Like dough that needs to rest before rising. Emma nodded thoughtfully. I think I get it now. Why you kept that part of yourself hidden for so long, but also why it needed to come back out. In a world too quick to judge by appearances, true value often remains concealed beneath modest exteriors. The most extraordinary talents sometimes hide in ordinary packages, waiting for the moment when revealing them will matter most.